Good evening. Good evening. Thank you. I'm Christa Wessel. I'm the morning host at what I hope is your favorite radio station, All Classical Portland, 89.9. Okay. Thanks for coming today. And thanks also to our special guest for this concert conversation. He's the principal oboist of our Oregon Symphony. His name is Martin Hebert. Marty to his friends.
Thanks.
It's on, yeah.
Okay. I just got to hold it close. Okay.
Yeah, you have to hold it close to your face.
Thank you. I hope you don't mind. I'm going slightly informal without the ties until I climb up on stage.
Yeah, he's got a big part to play in the first piece, so I want to thank you for doing this chat.
Sure. Well, we'll be done at 7, and you'll probably see, those of you that are here early before the concerts, will see a couple of people who are always on stage first, and I'm one of them. I like to whittle on my reeds and warm things up, and I like my stage time before the concert starts. So.
Well, I keep learning things about the oboe the more I hang out with this guy. In fact, just backstage, you were telling me about your instrument. Can you hold it up so that everybody knows, in case you don't know what an oboe is, this is an oboe. It's one of the two double reed, well, I shouldn't say two families of double reed instruments on the stage. And I've done an interview with one double reed player, Karen Miller Packwood, and talking to double reed players, they are crazy people. They spend all their time making reeds. So I want to talk a little bit about that and about your instrument. One thing you just taught me backstage is that you have to replace this instrument every few years.
I do. I buy a new one about every 2 years. This is by my last count, I think this is my 18th oboe that I've had in my career so far. They'll play for me for 3 or 4 years, depending on the instrument, and then they begin to change a little in such a way. They're still playable, but in such a way that I can't really use it in the orchestra. So I'm always looking for the next great instrument.
When you say you can't play it anymore in the orchestra, what exactly is happening to this?
Well, the inside of the instrument, the bore on an oboe is conical, so it's kind of like a trumpet. And it's very small at the top, you can't see, but the wood is quite thick, and so it's only about 5 millimeters in diameter at the top. So since it's wood and it can change and contract and expand and things, that over time it will change shape a little bit, and enough to change the sound. There are some, one of my colleagues, Karen Wagner, plays an instrument where they put in a sleeve of hard rubber inside that top joint there, partly to help prevent exactly this thing. And in fact, players of that instrument tend to be able to play them much longer, 10 and 20 years even. Why don't I play one of those, you might ask? Well, I like the sound of this particular brand. These are made in France, and I just like it. So I put up with the fact that I have to look for another one every few years.
So you've got an instrument that's constantly changing, and you've got reeds that are constantly changing. Now, I think I remember from talking to Karen, the principal bassoonist, that she can play a reed for maybe a week or two. Am I remembering that right?
Oh, it depends. Sometimes they can go a month or something like that.
Same thing for oboists?
No. For those who have not seen, let's see, I hope I have some. Oh, yeah, here we go. For those that haven't seen an oboe reed up close, it's pretty darn small and it's pretty thin. Those of you who are close by can see that the tip looks kind of white. Well, that's one fiber thick of this bamboo-like material. It's actually a species of bamboo that we all use: bassoons, oboes, clarinets, it's bagpipes. It's all the same. But because it's so thin, it breaks down pretty quickly. Even the acids and enzymes in your saliva will break it down over time. And so I usually count playing hours in terms of how long my reeds last, which is usually a few days, or I count myself lucky if it'll last a week. So basically I'm making a reed every day. I have a whole box of them right here. I can't swear they all work well, but there's at least a couple in there that I might be able to use tonight.
Has it been the case where you've gotten halfway through a concert and the reed gives out and you suddenly have to start up a new one?
Not very often. They do also crack when they get really old. You'll be playing on it and suddenly the pitch will go down and you look at it and then it's got a crack in it. You can't use it. But mostly it's just that they get kind of tired and they don't want to vibrate well anymore. And you can I can tell, hopefully before the audience can tell. So I have time to switch to another one.
Before even Marty plays the difficult part that's in the Hindemith Concerto for Orchestra, he plays that tuning note at the beginning of the concert.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I have a girlfriend who always says, "Ooh, that's my favorite song here." But I'm always fascinated because it's a high pressure moment for you. The whole orchestra tunes to that note, and if you are off, everybody's off.
That's true. It's part of my responsibilities to make sure that that's a good, firm reference pitch there that's not going to vary. And it's just sort of a traditional aspect of the job of the first oboe, that there is no real good reason that it has to be the oboe, in case anyone has ever wondered, why does the oboe give the A? It's strictly tradition, and I think it probably goes back to the earliest orchestras in Haydn's time, which only had strings and oboes and French horns. So of those instruments, the only ones that didn't really change that much were the oboes and the horns, and even the horns will change depending on the temperature and things. So it sort of by default it fell to the oboe to sound the reference pitch. So, and that tradition is just carried on. Plus other people say it's because the oboe has such a penetrating tone that everyone can hear it. I don't know, maybe that's true. I'll leave that for you to decide. But yeah, it's true. I have to do it once in the beginning of the well, actually two. We give one for the strings, one for the winds, and one for the strings, and then after intermission, same thing. And sometimes even more than that, if there's a big change, like a big set change, and a lot of change of personnel, and actually you probably will hear another one between the Hindemith that we're playing tonight and the Schumann Symphony, because there will be a change of personnel, and they're coming fresh onto the stage, and they're going to want to see where things are and get a chance to blow their instruments for a couple of seconds. So
Now, do you have perfect pitch, or are you using a tuner?
I don't have perfect pitch. I have pretty good relative pitch, and I certainly can tell on the oboe whether notes are flat or sharp. And I could tell what note any oboe player is playing, but that's just because I've memorized the tone color of all 37 notes on the oboe, because that's all we have. It has actually the smallest range of any orchestral instrument, really, except maybe the drum.
And if I might be so bold, only a few of those notes sound really good on the oboe.
I bet pretty hard.
Well,
Okay,
think
I'm
about
leaving right now.
I mean, a really high-pitched oboe is a penetrating sound, and that low pitch sounds kind of froggy.
Honky, maybe.
Honky,
Like
yeah.
that. No, it's true. That's a sort of meat and potato range where most of the great solos for oboe are written, are all within one octave, one 12-note span, mostly. So there's a few tonight that'll go a bit higher than that, you'll hear. But
So it's obvious that you play kind of a quirky instrument, an instrument that's constantly changing. You constantly have to make reeds. It seems like kind of a fussy instrument with a limited range. Why did you pick this instrument?
well, I guess you could say it picked me. It wasn't my first instrument. I mean, I played piano from a very early age, and then I actually tried the flute, and that was a horrible mistake. You don't ever want to hear me try to play the flute, I can tell you. I should say that my father is a flutist. He played for many years in the Cleveland Orchestra, and there are 7 of us children in the family, and we all played an instrument one way or the other, and only 2 of us are insane enough to actually play professionally, but yeah, so I started on the flute at probably age 11 or something, and that lasted about 2 weeks. And
So you
he
gave it a
could
fair
tell right
shot.
away. He said, "You don't really like this, do you?" And I went, "No." So he said, "Okay, we'll find you something else," and we did.
An oboe just stuck. It rang a spot in your heart.
I guess, yeah.
So you went on through high school, college training, deciding I'm going to be a professional oboist when I grow up.
Well, not exactly. I think, as I explained to you before, I was fortunate in a way. Most students that, if they really want a career in music, they have to be very, very motivated to do it, because the field is so tight and difficult, and there's so many students graduating from conservatories and schools of music and not nearly enough jobs for them. So you really have to be focused in order to get a job. And I mean, I did go to music school. I went to the Cleveland Institute of Music, and I always had shown some talent at the instrument, but I wasn't really sure that's what I wanted to do. And even in college, I wasn't really sure that's what I wanted to do. I was fortunate enough to get a temporary position in the Honolulu Symphony after I got out of school, and I liked it. I was like, yeah, okay, this is a good job, I like this. So then I started really buckling down and, focusing on the fact.
So after you got the job,
yeah.
you started practicing.
Well, no, it's not like I never practiced before.
Can I ask, can you guys hear Marty okay?
Can
Okay,
you-
I want to make sure.
Can you hear me in the back? Now you can.
I guess the point I was making is you told me you got that job in Honolulu without auditioning for it.
Right. So that's how I was fortunate, because I had taken 1 or 2 auditions while I was still in college, but hadn't obviously won anything. And the work required to prepare for an audition is so different than your normal practice routine. That was probably one of the reasons I didn't know if this is really what I wanted to do. But once I saw the brass ring, or whatever you want to say, then I was motivated enough to do the kind of work you need to do to take an audition. Which, if you've talked to any other musicians that try to do this, the audition process is so much more rigorous than even the most difficult music that you have to play on stage, that it's just unbelievable.
So you got the job in Honolulu without an audition.
I did.
And the next job?
Well, I was in Mexico City for about 4 years, and I was actually down there in a summer orchestra, also without an audition. But an opening came up in a permanent orchestra there, the Mexico City Philharmonic, and they had an audition, and I took it, and I won. So I was there for a little over 4 years.
So from Honolulu to Mexico to
Savannah, Georgia, where I played for about 15 years. Yeah, that was nice. It was more of a chamber orchestra, really. And that was also an audition. And then I was in the Florida Orchestra after that. In between there, I played for 1 year in the Atlanta Symphony. And then I was in Tampa, in the Florida Orchestra in Tampa, and then I came here.
Now you've been here for 6 seasons.
This is my 7th season, yep.
And if you don't mind me saying this, a lot of the more recent hires in the last 5, 6, 7 years have been youngsters in the orchestra. I mean, witness, for instance, our new principal flute.
What's she talking about? I'm 29.
What is our new principal flutist, Jess Sindel, is what?
Jess Sindel's 23.
23, right? So how old were you when you won this job?
29. No, I was 50, actually, which is pretty unusual. Most people stop beating their heads against the wall if they haven't won an audition by the time they're 40, and I was. Actually, there's an interesting story about how I came here. One of the former concert mistresses here, Amy Schwartz-Moretti, had played with me in Tampa for 2 or 3 years, and then she got the job here. And I was sitting at my reed table one day, scraping away on reeds, and she called me up and said, "We have a principal Oboe opening here. Are you going to take the audition?" I said, "Well, I hadn't really thought about it. No, I don't think so." And she was, "Oh, you should. It's great. Carlos is great. The orchestra's great. You got to come. It's better, you know." So she convinced me to come take the audition, and I won. And then we had 1 year together, and then she left. Oh, well.
Now, can I ask, during that audition process, did you, and I don't mean to harp on your age, I've asked him if this is okay if I ask him about this.
I was definitely the oldest one at the audition.
Yeah, okay. And how does that feel?
In that particular one, it didn't feel that bad because I have taken a number of auditions later in life, so I'm sort of used to being one of the older players in the audition process. It can be a little intimidating, but on the other hand, I've also taken a lot of auditions, so I have the experience to know kind of how these things go. I have probably taken about 50 auditions in my life, and 1 year I took 13 when I was out of a job and I was looking for a job, and I took everything that came up. So I went through, I've collected all of every audition gives you a list of all the repertoire that you're expected to know for the audition. And I have 50 sheets of those from different orchestras. And so, yeah, I had become more used to the process and I knew what to expect. And so I was a little bit less easily flustered. The process is really designed to be stressful. They want to see how you perform under pressure. So,
I mean, obviously you performed well under pressure.
I guess well enough.
yeah, when talking about that, how having gone through 50 auditions maybe prepared you better for this one than some of the younger folks
I
who
think
are.
so. There are some people, Jess is actually an example, that was basically her first audition, or at least her first audition for a full-time orchestra. And there are a few other examples of that, people that are just phenomenally talented and don't know enough to be too scared, I guess. So she wasn't too scared and she did great. And other people in their 30s who've taken a few can get really scared because they know just enough to know how hard it is, but so.
Well, speaking of a couple of those youngsters, if you attend these concert conversations regularly, in February I'll be talking to our new young percussionist, Sergio Carreno. And then I think in March or April, I am speaking with Jessica Sindel in this format too. So we get to talk to the young whippersnappers and see how intimidated they were by the audition process too. Now, did you have designs when you were in Savannah? Like, I want to move out to the West Coast. I want to see what it's like out there.
No, this was, I had never been to the Northwest until I came for the audition here. I had plenty of friends who said, oh, you've got to go. In fact, I had a friend when I was in Honolulu who was from Portland, and she sang the praises of Portland up and down. This was a while ago, back in the last century. But so I'd always heard great things, and the opportunity hadn't arisen, and I didn't go. And so my first visit to Portland was on the audition, and I fell in love right away. What can I say?
What was that experience like? Walking, through Portland. Did you think, I belong here? Were you attracted to some of the quirkiness right off the bat?
Well, I was. I think my first taste of Deschutes Black Butte Porter kind of sealed it. It was like, okay, I'm home. But also my first hotel stay when I came for the audition, I stayed at the Kennedy School, which I knew nothing about except I found it on the internet, and I thought, oh, this looks interesting, and so I stayed there. And most of you probably know, it's all the many things it is. It was an old elementary school. They took some of the elementary classrooms and divided them up made 2 hotel rooms out of each one. And they're like 20-foot ceilings, and they still have the chalkboards, and there's lots of wood. In short, a great place to play. The sound was really nice. So much better than your typical, motel room with carpeting everywhere, and it's all very dull and everything. So I think I was sort of inspired by the acoustic of my hotel room. And it probably helped me get the job. Plus, it's this quirky place, It's a hotel / soaking pool / movie theater / brew pub. Only in Portland, right?
Yeah, you said, yes, please.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you do for fun when you're not?
Fun? I make reeds. No. Okay, so most oboe players, and to some extent bassoon players, bitch and moan about having to make reeds all the time, because that's what we do. And I certainly don't want to call it my hobby. I like to hike. So, of course, this is another good reason to live in Portland. I haven't done every single possible hike in the gorge, but I've done quite a few. And I just recently bought a house in Southeast that's not far across the river, so I bike when I can and when it's not raining. You may or may not have know some of the other members of the orchestra. There's a half a dozen really avid bicyclists who bike every day to work. Rain, shine, sun, sleet, whatever. I'm not one of those. But as much as I can, and it takes less time than it does to drive, so that's a good thing. So biking, hiking.
Drinking beer.
Some beer.
Yeah.
Deschutes Black Porter being one.
For those of you who come in late, this is Marty Hebert, who's the principal oboist of the Oregon Symphony. And just saying your name once.
Just think, a bear went over the mountain.
But it's Hebert. And
right. In French it would be Hebert. But so, my father was French-Canadian, and he actually went by Hebert because he grew up in the United States, but his father went by Hebert. And so did I when I was growing up. But when I moved to Savannah, Georgia, there were lots of Heberts. And of course there they say, Hebert. Oh, Mr. Hebert. But I found that I liked it, and that was 30-some years ago, so it just sort of stuck, and that's what I like. But, you can call me whatever. It doesn't matter.
Do all oboists tend to have this similar demeanor?
What, you mean neurosis?
Oh, you're obviously a charming, happy guy. All the vibrations from the reed,
I'll pay you later. Yeah, well, it's true. They think that we go crazy because of the pressure on our brain or something. But some of us turn kind of red when we play. I think I do even a little bit. You'll have to look tonight if you can see me and see. There's, especially in a long solo, which oboe players get a lot. Because maybe I could show you with the reed. You know what I'm going to do?
What are you going to do?
I'm going to pass one around, let everybody look at an oboe reed here.
That's brave of you, sir.
It's not one I was going to use anyway.
Okay.
So not only can you see how thin the tip is, you can see how small the opening is. It's incredibly small, and really we don't use very much air. I can play a note about as long as I can hold my breath. And composers know this, so they write these long solos with no place to breathe. And as if sort of challenging us to do this. In our next classical, when we do some Strauss, you'll hear several really long solos like that. So I probably will turn a little red in a really long solo like that, but no, it doesn't hurt, and as far as I know, it doesn't cause any damage. So.
Can I ask you to play a little something for us?
Sure.
Now? And
well, why don't you talk for a second, because I'm going to warm this thing up.
Yeah, I don't want to tell you what to play. You can play something for us, but I'm wondering if you would play a little snippet of the Hindemith Concerto for Orchestra, because you do have a decently large part in this piece. Would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, if I can do it from memory.
Okay. You can play just a Mary Had a Little Lamb for you if you want to.
Another thing many of you may know or notice if you watch the oboe players on stage beforehand is they're doing something with just the reed. They're crowing the reed. This is what we call it, crowing, and it can be annoying if we do it a lot, especially to someone that lives with us, but it actually tells us something about the characteristics of the reed, and so we're in the process of fixing them up and scraping them. We do that a lot. I do it so much now I don't even notice that I'm doing it, but it is often helpful.
And in doing it just now, what is that telling you about the reed right now? Sorry, I keep interrupting your warm-up process.
Okay. We're listening for a particular pitch. It's a C. And if it's higher than that, the reed is probably going to be sharp. And if it's lower than that, the reed's probably going to be flat. And it should also have more than one tone in it. It has a little buzz to it or something, and that's actually a good thing. And just sort of the characteristic of that buzz can tell us also when I also articulate it by putting my tongue on the reed and pulling it away, and I can tell whether it's going to be stiff or free-blowing or, various characteristics.
Oh yeah, you've got a part underneath your armpit.
Okay, so I should also warn you that the first few notes are going to sound like dog do. I mean, the oboe players don't like to go for very long without playing, just because the reed changes so rapidly. It dries out a little, or many of us will complain in the course of a rehearsal that the reed has changed because the air pressure changed. A storm moved in or something like that, and they're so temperamental that they will change with weather conditions. So, so now that I've talked for 30 seconds without playing my reed, I'm going to play my reed again.
That was like a magic trick.
So why is that feather in my oboe, you might ask? Which I forgot about. I actually use it to swab out my instrument. Some of you may have noticed that the oboe players use feathers. Turkey feathers. Turkey center tail feathers, to be exact. It's what we use. And it's not really to swab, to clean the water, the condensed water vapor out of the instrument, as much as it is to spread it around the inside. When you coat the inside with moisture after you've played for a minute or two, it helps ensure that whatever moisture there is in there will run down the bottom rather than going into the keys. So you may also have heard occasionally, hopefully not very often, either a bassoon or an oboe or a clarinet get water in their keys, and you hear a horrible gurgle, and they have to stop and clean it out or do whatever. So we're usually trying to make sure that doesn't happen by doing what I'm... Yeah, you'll see later. Which is how the solo starts in the beginning of the second movement of the Hindemith. Although solo is probably not really the right word, because it's, like a lot of music of Hindemith, it's actually a tune, although it didn't really sound like much, but it's a tune that's a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle that fits in with a few other players that are playing at the same time, the clarinet, I think the bassoon, and they're doing something a little different than what I'm doing, but when you put it all together, it makes a melody. So
that Hindemith is a fascinating piece of music, and it's
it
in
is.
and out, and it's fast, and it is taut and bright and fun. There's humor in that piece.
It is. It's not one that most of us in the orchestra have been familiar with. It's not. I don't believe it's performed that often, but it is very much in his language, which is, I don't know how many Hindemith fans do we have out here? Okay, only a few, right? I mean, he doesn't have the sort of draw that say Rachmaninoff or Tchaikovsky or something. His music is a little bit more cerebral maybe, but we have another Hindemith piece coming later in the year, which is terrific. And it's maybe less overtly romantic, I would say, but still it's a little jazzy. It's got some great rhythms. Sometimes it's playful. Sometimes it's sort of jaunty. So musicians love it, and I think you will too, because our conductor tonight is terrific, and he's really bringing out the whole piece to all of us. So.
Christoph Koenig is his name, and I hear great things
Yeah.
from musicians about his energy. And from you too. Everybody loves Marty Hebert. Thank you for sharing a little bit of that with us.
You can pay me later.
Thanks, Marty.